Hey guys, welcome back to the House of Gouldians. So this week is episode 12 of the season. We're about halfway through the season from a episode perspective, not from the breeding perspective. The breeding side we're just getting going. In today's episode we've got lots of exciting stuff happening. So we're going to quickly catch up with the Majestic bloodline. But then I thought we would discuss some new arrivals that I picked up today. That's why we're in here at night, because I was out most of the morning. And I'll go through sort of what those mutations are all about. So it's a yellow rump that we got from Finch Haven, and then we also picked up a beautiful purple-breasted yellow-backed cockbird. I haven't quite decided where I'm fitting him into the plans just yet, but he's a 1-year-old bird, so the idea is actually more towards next season with him, but I'll show you the bird anyway. So from a commoner's perspective, we've got some news in terms of that side of it. Egbert and Victoria behind me here, remember we said that they were the first year pair from the House of Batista, and the first clutch they hatched the eggs, but the cockbird tossed the chicks, so he didn't know what to do with these little aliens in his nest. We were disappointed by it, but it was kind of to be expected with first year birds. So round 2, they hatched them. They hatched 2 days ago effectively, but unfortunately they've turned them into what a biltong, as we say in South Africa, which basically means just dried them out. So the parent birds, this time they figured out that they're supposed to keep them warm and not throw them out the nest when they hatch, but they didn't quite figure out that they needed to actually feed these little mouths that are sort of waving at them in the dark. So unfortunately, once again, it comes down to first years. So in terms of Egbert and Victoria, we haven't had any successes yet. Now they are that was their second round. So normally I would cut them after the second round. I will probably still do that. The thinking though is that normally you go up to 12 eggs, and both clutches were quite small with them. It was 2 rounds of 4, so it's 8 eggs, not 12. So there's still a little bit of wiggle room there. I haven't decided yet though at this stage. So yeah, stay tuned and we'll see what we do within the next sort of week or two, whether we allow them to go again or whether we call it quits for them for the season. And it doesn't matter if we do, like I said, they were first year birds, so you know, I had hopes that they might breed successfully because of the show and that kind of thing, but if they don't, it's really not the end of the world. So yeah, we're not too worried about that. In terms of George and Elizabeth, however, that's our second year pair of red-headed purple breast, and last season they were first year, so I didn't even try and breed them last year, but this year they were sort of the anchor, if you like, of the red-headed purple breasted pairs, and they finally started being nest active. So they now, the cockbirds in and out of the nest. You can actually see Elizabeth behind me there, that she hopped on the wire, and they're busy sort of investigating the nest and adding nesting material and that kind of thing. So I fully expect eggs from them fairly soon. And that's pretty much the scenario in the bird room in general. So the second year birds are all now sort of coming into condition in terms of actually wanting to breed. And you can see the atmosphere in the rooms change. So there's not as much singing because now the cocks have already got their mates. They're not having to attract them as much, which is sort of more the courtship phase, if you like, of the breeding season. So it's quieter in the room. But in the morning when you switch on the lights, if you sit down and have a cup of coffee, you'll hear the birds start singing. That's when they do sing to each other, and you'll see mating activity and all that kind of thing taking place. So yeah, it's definitely sort of more towards that part of the breeding cycle that they're moving towards. And yeah, I fully expect us to have some good successes shortly out of all the second year pairs that are now sort of starting to come into sort of breeding mode. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of the Majestic bloodline. The one other one that I wanted to mention was that Louis and Charlotte, they actually about midway through incubating that last clutch of eggs that we were going to try. So remember their first clutch, they unfortunately only raised the chicks to about day 4, and then they abandoned them. So this time around, instead of just laying 3 eggs and 2 hatching, they've laid 6 good eggs. Yeah, so we'll see how many of the 6 actually hatch, and then this time the hope is that they won't just feed them for a day or 2, that they'll actually then raise them properly. Remembering that they're also one of our first year pairs, so they're also sort of learning and figuring it out as they go along. So yeah, that's kind of the Majestic as it is. There is a couple of other pairs that you guys haven't necessarily been introduced to as yet, but they sort of also in the sort of early nest building stages, that kind of thing. So, or halfway through the nest and that type of stuff. So they're not really at a point where there's much to talk about with them, but we'll keep tracking them, and I need to start introducing you guys to some more of the pairs within the next episode or 2. So we'll look at doing that next week. Maybe we can look at doing that side of it. All right, so let's move on to the commoners. So in the commoner section today, I said to you that we had got a couple of new birds in the bird room. So the first one that I'd like to discuss is our yellow rump cockbird. So it's an orange-headed, purple-breasted yellow rump. Now, when we did the world show, they didn't recognize the mutation because it's not a mutation that Europe is very familiar with. So it's important that you pay attention to today's show so that you understand what to expect from the mutation and what it's all about. So first of all, your yellow rump is a dominant mutation, strictly speaking, if you look at the rump portion of the bird. In that, if you had to breed it to a normal, you can expect to get yellow rump offspring within your first clutch. It's not a recessive type scenario where you have to take a normal looking bird that's split for yellow rump and breed it back. It doesn't work like that. It's a dominant gene, not a recessive gene. Why I say the yellow rump portion behaves like that is that there's other aspects of the birds that there's still a bit of debate around. The blue ring around the back of the neck goes purple. And this is not through color feeding or anything funny like that. It is part of the mutation. Now, why I say it behaves a bit differently from your typical dominant genes and that kind of thing, we're not sure if it's a different genetic that's got bred at the same time as the yellow rump, and that's why the two are typically seen together. But it doesn't always come out, even though the yellow rump is dominant and is present. So for it to be a yellow rump edged bird, the rump will always be yellow. However, you do on some birds get the purple collar, and on other birds you don't. You also get some birds with a lot of edging around the wings, whereas other birds you don't get that edging. The wings are basically green like any other sort of normal green-backed bird. So there's different aspects of the mutation that's not 100% fully understood yet. And the guys sort of raised an eyebrow when I said that the edging portion is acting almost like a incomplete dominant. The one color is not really dominating the other. Now, in birds and that, you don't really get too much of that happening. But why I'm sort of interested in that sort of aspect of genetics potentially with the yellow rump is not because of the rump itself, but because of that edging. Because some birds you get basically none of that, whereas others the bird looks almost yellow. There's so much yellow edging to the feathering, and that variability is why it's an interesting one from a genetics perspective. Is it just sort of a strange permutation of what is the dominant aspect or dominant gene, which is the yellow rump, or is there something else going on that's behaving more as a codominant, not a codominant gene, but behaving like one, where it's kind of bleeding through from the other color. So yeah, it's an interesting discussion. At this point, there's a lot more research that needs to be done with regards to the yellow rump around that collar and around the edging on the feathers. But don't get me wrong, the genetic itself is a dominant mutation. So if you breed it back to a normal bird, you're going to get a visually yellow rump offspring or a normal offspring. Right, so moving on to the double factor yellow black-headed bird that we bought. This is a cock bird, and he is also a 2021 bird, so he's a 1 year old, and I will be keeping him back for next year. Now my thinking with him is that I have the sibling to the pied hen, which is a yellow black-headed purple breast hen, and the ideal with her, if she doesn't turn out to be carrying anything in terms of the pied project, would then be to look for breeding her to this chap, because it then gets some blood, new blood into the yellow gene pool. We do have 2 dilutes in the room, a black-headed dilute, purple breast that she's with this year, and then we have another one that we're looking at as well, but the head color is wrong. So I wanted one that is the right head color. It's a double factor though, and that way we can produce birds that from a cock perspective are unrelated. So you can see we're only at the beginning of this year's breeding season, but I'm already starting to look to the future and to next season. And it's quite important that you do that, particularly if you don't want to make the mistake that I've proven to you this year in terms of the first year birds. You need to be constantly planning a year ahead so that you know, okay, well, hang on, I'm going to be short a cock or a hen. And when it's available this year, you purchase the bird, you know that it's a young bird from 2021 in this case, and next year it will be in its absolute prime to start breeding with, because now it's waited that extra season. So now is really the time for me to buy for actually next year, not for this year. So yeah, this is a classic example of that kind of looking forward and seeing what we're going to be needing and planning accordingly. So that's the sort of new edition side of things for today. I then sort of wanted to sort of catch you up on what's happening on the commoner side in terms of actual breeding. So you'll notice that the blue pastel cock is missing from this cage over here, and he's on egg duty at the moment. So they laid a clutch when I last checked of 6 eggs. I don't know if they laid a couple more after that. They haven't started sitting through the night yet, which, okay, you can see it's just popped up there out there now. So that tells me that they might still be in the laying phase, in which case it's going to be quite a big clutch. It would put them on probably about 8 eggs. So I'm expecting them to start incubating either tonight or tomorrow, but we'll have to see what happens. So that's where we're at with them. And then for the next portion of the show, I wanted to start talking to you about the sort of future plans and what the thinking is. So on this season, one of the things that I've found is that, like these cages behind me now, that okay, they don't have lighting in them, which is part of the problem, but even during the day when there is light, it's not easy for you guys to actually see what's happening in the cages behind me. So I've decided to move to a different style caging, which would make a lot more conducive to the show. It's going to be a phased in approach over the next sort of 6 to 12 months, and then we're also looking at building a new Gouldian room that's far more suited to forming and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of exciting changes coming for season 2. So some of those you might sort of start noticing in the background over the next couple of episodes, whichever the case might be. But yeah, that's kind of where we're going with that. So I thought we would have a look at the new cage. Right, so looking at the front of the cage, you can see I've gone for a perspex front, and the reason for that being is that I can then make the fake bars a lot wider, which then gives you guys more visibility of what's happening with the birds themselves. So that was the reason for going that route instead of normal bars. But the top of the cage is normal meshing, or grid should I say, so that allows the free flow of air. That's very important. We've then got a tray at the bottom, so for ease of cleaning. And the other advantage with the Perspex front, it will keep the clean or the amount of cleaning in the room down to a minimum, because there won't be any seed on the floor. On the left hand side, you'll notice that there's a slider. The idea is that the new bird room, remember these cages have been custom built for me, so the new bird room, that slide will pull open and release the birds into a flight area for when the end of the breeding season comes and I want the birds to then go out into a flight and get some exercise. On the right hand side of the cage, you'll notice that we've got a couple of things. So if you open up the little door, there's the nest box, the food bowls, water bowls, grit bowl, etc. But on the outside of the door, we've got a space for the names of the birds, so that you guys can see who's who, and also as a reminder to myself. And then you've got the bulldog clip, which will then hold the record card, the breeding card. So that's the sort of front of the cage. Looking now in from the sort of top towards the nest box side, you can clearly see the nest box now and where the food and water comes through at the bottom. And then on the left hand side, you'll notice the stress perch that I've had permanently built in. So it's the cage, when it's fully configured, will have two perches in the main area, and then the stress perch in the corner for when the birds are molting, that kind of thing, or when they're under stress for whatever reason. You'll also notice around the side of the box that there's the grit bowl, so that's where the grit will be going forward. And then the slide, I have the option of potentially hanging an additional bowl if I really wanted to. That would be obviously made to fit, but I could do a bath over there or something that slides in on the same runners as the pull out for the actual flight. So yeah, I've got a couple of different options there. The grid work has been done out of fiberglass rods and made up by another friend of mine. So those grids will never rust, and they're flexible and that kind of thing, which makes it an absolute pleasure in terms of cleaning and all the rest of it. I don't have to worry about rust at all or damaging paintwork. You'll notice on your normal bars and that they very quickly start chipping the paint and you end up with rust and that kind of thing, which doesn't look good. So yeah, that's the sort of thinking on these. Yeah, unfortunately they come at a bit of a price tag, which is to be expected because there's a lot of work that goes into these, so they're well worth it, but they're not cheap. So that's why we're going to do a phased in approach over the next year or so, where we will do 2 or 3 boxes a month until we have all the ones that we're needing. And this is going to coincide with the building of the new Gouldian room as well, which will be a 7 by 3 meter room. Well, 7 by 3 meters, but that includes the flights on the outside edge. So it will give us a decent sized room on the inside and a very neat room. And yeah, we'll have a demonstration area and all that kind of thing. So it'll be a lot more conducive for the show. So yeah, that's what your sort of contributions or donations are going to be going towards that, and then lighting and sound and all that kind of thing that we'll build into the new room as well, so that it just makes the whole experience for you as a viewer a lot better. And yeah, that's where we're at. So that's the plans for season 2, if you like.